one of the things that the federal government can do, and this might sound, it doesn't matter. One of the things the federal government can do is stop focusing on LGBT issues. And the reason I say that is when the goal of the federal government is to center the marginalized. And so it actually goes beyond LGBT issues, but actually goes to more the impulse of everyone on the left or the left-leaning people. The federal government should be focusing on families, should be focusing on traditional families, should be focusing on men and women having babies. Mm-hmm. That's what continues your society. We need to have education that does not demonize the American, our history. I think the 1776 Project or whatever it is, the 17...
They're bringing that back, by the way.
Yeah, which is great. That kind of stuff is what you should be teaching your children in schools. If you refuse to teach that kind of stuff, your school should lose any funding, right? Completely and totally. The federal government should not be paying for schools to teach children that the American people and American history is uniquely bad.
Or that think about how insane it is. You have the U.S. American government funding schools that are teaching the kids, not that America's bad, but that their United States of America government is corrupt and evil and intrinsically, what interest do you have besides destroying the country?
Yep.
Who mentioned Hungary?
I did. I love it.
Did?
Oh, yeah, I think we both did.
I just looked it up, and it says Hungary's birth rate has been declining over recent years. This trend has been consistent since 2022. The
probably why they're
fertility rate has shown a slight increase in recent years, reaching, well, it's still early, but 1.5 births per woman in 2025, a 0.45% increase from 2024. Despite these efforts, the birth rate has continued to fall, and that reached 1.5 births per woman in 2023, which is 11% lower than in 2022.
It's feminism.
I don't think that the government can do anything about it.
Well,
honestly, because it's about people's hearts and their values, and the government can't do anything to foment a cultural change on that level.
They can do some things. The question is the level of impact it would have.
Yeah.
So I think that offering tax incentives and things like that, benefits will help, but not enough. You're right. There has to be a cultural shift. And I think largely through USAID, we've had this massive shift towards telling women that they should be girl bosses and they should live alone. And, it's wild to me that if you look at the voting patterns, you basically have families versus single people.
Yeah.
Like liberals are largely single women who have cats.
Yep.
That's not an insult. Cats are great. I got a cat too. I'm saying that's just what they are. And if you go to one of these people and you ask them about what would you want to invest in, they're going to say, but Trump putting tariffs is going to make my avocado toast cost more money. And then I'm saying, if we don't bring back American culture and industry, what will be left for our children? And they go, I don't care. I don't have any.
Yeah, I think you're exactly right, and I think that the idea that, like Mary said, it's not something that government can do, but government can push around the edges, right? So
it seems counterintuitive to make it more comfortable for people so that they feel comfortable with having children, because historically we can see people only really have children when they're uncomfortable and they're afraid for their lives.
No. It's the opposite. It's the opposite. It's actually more closely tied. People getting married and having kids is actually more closely tied to their outlook of the future. You had a baby boom after World War II. Why? Because Americans were coming back and they just got done with a bloody, terrible war, and they knew and felt that the future was good.
Yeah.
But one thing I want to point out. So I read this book years ago called What to Expect When No One's Expecting. And it was by Jonathan Last before he went nuts on this Trump derangement stuff. And he points out one very important thing. The population carries a lot of momentum. it's very tough to stop a baby boom or to slow it down, because what happens is you have a bunch of kids and then those kids just naturally have a bunch of kids. But at the same time, population decline is incredibly hard to stop. Once it starts to get in motion, for example, once your average woman who hasn't had a kid turns 35, well, her fertility drops by 50% when she hits her 30s. So it's incredibly difficult to have more kids. I will say this, though, Mary, is in terms of what the government can and can't do to get people getting married and having kids again, there's a lot they can stop doing right now that would help at least stop the bleeding. And what I mean by that is, like, why are we have 1.6 is our fertility rate right now, which is like, 0.6 under.
To be fair, liberals are at like 1.3 and conservatives are like 1.8.
Well, we got to get those numbers.
But
I know, but I'm just saying, like, liberals are doing worse.
What I meant when I said that is that you can just see when any country becomes wealthy.
Yeah.
They just stop having kids, and it just seems to be their preference.
That's a great point, because it really is like the unsolved problem is that wealth creates a society that doesn't want to have kids. And the funny thing is, like, kids are like the physical manifestation of a hopeful society, right? Like, you don't have a lot of kids if you think tomorrow is going to be worse for your children. People don't, they just don't, they don't, if you think that, like, the world's going to end, and that's part of why liberals don't have kids nowadays, is because they think, oh, I don't want to bring kids into this world that's getting hotter and we're going to have a war. They're all nihilistic at the end of the day. And so they're like, well, I want to live for myself. Whereas people that have religion and have hope for the future, or at the very least hope in general, even if they don't have hope for human society, they're like, well, when we die, we all go to heaven, so it's okay to have kids. That's better than not having kids, because they believe that that's what they were told by God. They were instructed to go forth and multiply. But I do think that children are the physical manifestation of a hopeful society. And I think that without religion, you end up with a lot more nihilism and a lot of people that are just like, I don't want to have kids. I'm going to live for myself and live for today. How you solve that, I don't know. But with wealth, seems to come less religion or more. It's weird because it's not really like less religion. They just turned it to state religious, but like it's not the same kind of traditional religion. And then you have fewer people having kids because they don't have the same impulses. They think, oh, I'm going to live for me. So I don't know that I have the solution, but I do think that the government shouldn't be focusing on the margins. I think the government should be focusing on people that want to have families and want to have kids.
We were talking about this a little bit before the show, because I was playing Like a Stone by Audioslave, which, like, to anybody with a brain, is about a dude reading the Bible, and then, like, he says, I regret all the things I'd done and I want to be in heaven and all that stuff. And the point I was bringing up is that culturally in this country, when we have these songs or movies that are very right wing in their I guess message, the right never cheered for it. It was just taken for granted. It was the way it was supposed to be. So Captain America, as a reference, I give quite a bit. The first Captain America movie, and it was like 2010 or whatever, is about a dude who's desperately trying to enlist to serve his country. The second movie is about a guy realizing the government was corrupt and overrun by fascists who had secretly taken over it for the whole time and been operating since World War II. And it's a very different message. People still enjoy these movies, but I look at it like, why don't conservatives, or why didn't they? I suppose it doesn't matter why they didn't, but they didn't say, hey, this is really, really great, make more of it. What ends up happening is the woke activists come in and complain, and the squeaky wheel gets the grease, and you end up with 14 years or 10 years of wokeness until finally, it's not even necessarily conservatives, just regular people were like, we do not want this weird garbage.
That's a good point, Tim. Like, I do think conservatives and anyone on the right needs to do a better job of rewarding anyone that's doing the right thing and producing beautiful pro-America, pro-God, pro-family art. And as you were talking, it reminded me of the Chick-fil-A protests. I think it was around 2011, 2012. Their founder comes out and says they only respect, one man, one woman marriage. And the left did a whole backlash. All the LGBT groups started boycotting them. And conservatives rose to the challenge, and they did a boycott. And it literally put Chick-fil-A even more on the map than it already was. It exploded their growth. And if you think about what would have happened if conservatives just went away and didn't go and do the boycott, didn't reward Chick-fil-A for.
Didn't Jay Foley ultimately cave to a lot of woke demands later on, though?
They did a little bit, but it was more on the tolerance end of things. But they never changed their position on gay marriage. Yeah, I guess maybe I'm talking myself out of this. Yeah, I mean, they did kind of.
Well, that's because you're right. Conservatives did this, but then in the late 2010s, they stopped.
Yeah.
It was, I guess, just battered and beaten down. But now things are starting to turn around.
Yeah.
Thanks for checking out this clip from Timcast IRL. Make sure to watch the show live Monday through Friday at 8 p.m. Subscribe to this channel, and we will see you all there.